DC is fighting back with suits and sandwiches. Yes, when we left off last week, Trump had declared his dominion over the district by issuing an executive order proclaiming that there is a, quote, crime emergency that justifies his takeover of the city under the Home Rule Act. He'd nominally placed Attorney General Pam Bondi in charge of the DC Police Department. He'd called up the National Guard and commanded that homeless encampments be cleared. And a lot of people were pretty upset about this. Protesters gathered at an ICE checkpoint along U Street. A DOJ employee hurled a Subway sandwich at federal law enforcement, more on that later, and advocates protested outside the DC Police Department. But the press noted that DC Mayor Muriel Bowser appeared pretty zen about these developments. Well, since then, Trump and Bondi have ratcheted up their takeover of the District of Columbia, and Mayor Bowser has finally decided to take the fight to the courts. Now, on the evening of August 14th, without giving any warning to DC's Metropolitan Police Department, Bondi issued order number 6370-2025, restoring safety and security to the District of Columbia. In the order, Bondi made Terrence Cole, the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DC's Emergency Police Commissioner, effective immediately. Bondi asserted that, quote, Commissioner Cole shall assume all of the powers and duties vested in the District of Columbia Chief of Police. And she stated that the current Chief of Police and other leadership had to get approval from Commissioner Cole before issuing any further police department directives. Bondi's August 14th order also purported to rescind or suspend provisions of 3 immigration-related Metropolitan Police Department orders. First, AG Bondi suspended 2 DC general orders that limited the DC Police Department's immigration enforcement capabilities, preventing DC police from assisting civil immigration authorities unless there's a criminal warrant or court order prohibiting them from checking someone's immigration status, and barring DC police from enforcing civil immigration laws. Earlier on August 14th, DC Police Commissioner Pamela Smith had already signed an executive order modifying these general orders and allowing the police department to share more information with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But this wasn't enough of a capitulation for the Trump administration, so Bondi suspended both general orders and also rescinded Smith's executive order by fiat. Bondi's August 14th order also directed the police department to step up enforcement of existing laws and regulations related to unlawful occupancy of public spaces, which means clearing out more homeless camps. That same day, the DEA proudly posted a picture of Terrence Cole's DC police badge on Twitter. The badge doesn't expire until August 13th of 2026, which is obviously long past the 30-day limit created by the Home Rule Act. And of course, because this is the Trump administration and incompetence is the brand, Terrence's name, which should be spelled Terrance, was misspelled. But DC Attorney General Brian Schwab made sure that he spelled Terrence's name correctly when he filed suit against Cole, Trump, Bondi, and several Trump administration agencies the next day. On August 15th, the District of Columbia, represented by Mr. Schwab, asked DC District Court Judge Anna Reyes for a temporary restraining order blocking Trump's takeover of the DC Police Department. DC argued that Trump's actions violated the Home Rule Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the Constitution. Now, as we've talked about before, in 1973, Congress passed the Home Rule Act, which granted DC the right to create its own government and run the city with some autonomy. But this right isn't absolute. Section 740 of the Home Rule Act creates a narrow exception to DC's right of self-governance, allowing that, quote, whenever the president determines that special conditions of an emergency nature exist that require the use of the Metropolitan Police Force for federal purposes, he may direct the mayor to provide him, and the mayor shall provide such services of the Metropolitan Police Force as the president may deem necessary and appropriate. So while the Home Rule Act does allow the president to exert some control over the district, there are a lot of caveats. Under Section 740, the president can only take control when an emergency exists. Trump claims that there is a, quote, crime emergency in DC, but Bowser and the DC leadership have repeatedly argued that no such emergency exists. They've pointed to statistics that show that violent crime in DC is actually down compared to prior years, and is actually much safer than many other American cities. Though the Trump administration likes to compare DC crime statistics to foreign cities like New Delhi to point out that our homicide rate is quite a bit higher, though that might also have something to do with the fact that the citizens of Delhi don't have the American freedoms of having so many guns on the streets. America. But in their brief, plaintiffs also cleverly point to several instances when the Trump administration itself proudly proclaimed that crime in DC has been dropping this year. In April, for example, Ed Martin crowed about how DC crime was down 25%, and a few weeks later, Trump bragged about the statistic in a White House press conference.
Senator Tillis has come out against Ed Martin as U.S. Attorney. Do you have any response to that?
Well, it's disappointing because, I know Eddie's very talented. Crime is down in Washington, D.C., street crime, violent crime by 25%.
So if the administration is allowed to claim that ordinary street crime is an emergency, plaintiffs argue that the exception would swallow the rule. Section 740 also allows the president to use the police department for, quote, federal purposes. Plaintiffs argue that Congress meant protecting things that belong to the federal government, like its people, property, and agencies, not handling everyday local crime or arrests. Plaintiffs also argue that Section 40 doesn't allow the president to take control of the police department, as Bondi and Trump have tried to do by installing Cole as emergency police commissioner. The act only allows for the president to direct the mayor to provide him with services of the police force. So by placing Cole in charge of the police force, plaintiffs argued that Trump had circumvented Mayor Bowser's authority under the act, and giving Cole carte blanche to, quote, assume all of the powers and duties vested in the District of Columbia Chief of Police goes far beyond providing services as the act envisions. So according to the plaintiffs, Bondi had no authority to unilaterally rescind or suspend any DC policies or local government orders either. The act requires the mayor to allow the DC police to provide federal services. It does not allow the federal government to usurp policymaking authority. Section 740 is also time limited. The act only allows the president to assert control over the district for 48 hours, and he can extend that if he gives Congress a heads up, which Trump actually did do here. But that still only gives him this special authority for 30 days. And as the plaintiffs pointed out, Trump has said numerous times that he intends to run DC for a long time.
And we're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days.
DC also argued that Bondi's August 14th order violated the Administrative Procedure Act's prohibition against arbitrary and capricious agency action. Plaintiffs claim that the order was rushed out without explanation or consideration of alternatives, and the federal government did not provide reasons for why such drastic action was necessary, nor did it look at the risks to public safety that would come from disrupting the police chain of command. And the risks are quite serious, according to the real DC Police Commissioner Pamela Smith. In her declaration, Commissioner Smith declared, quote, if effectuated, the Bondi order would upend the command structure of the MPD, endangering the safety of the public and law enforcement officers alike. In my nearly 3 decades in law enforcement, I have never seen a single government action that would cause a greater threat to law and order than this dangerous directive. Plaintiffs cited the unusual list of constitutional violations, including separation of powers and take care clause. By overstepping the boundaries of Congress's Home Rule Act, Trump had violated Congress's authority, and by ignoring the Home Rule Act limitations, he'd violated constitutional requirements that the president, quote, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Now, temporary restraining orders, or TROs, require immediate action, so on Friday, August 15th, Judge Reyes held a hearing. But both sides are not backing down, and it's clear to see why when you take a look at how the media is covering this lawsuit. Over 260 sources covered the story, with 43% of the coverage coming from the left, 36% coming from the center, and only 21% coming from the right. And when you examine the headlines, you see some very different frames emerge that shape how readers interpret and understand a legal showdown like this. On the left, the most common phrase is hostile takeover. On the right, headlines are more likely to refer to the lawsuit as a complaint, or even frame it as a retaliation for Trump replacing the DC police commissioner. And from the center, sources mostly frame the story around fact-checking Trump's false claims about DC. But the headlines you read first have immense power to shape how you understand the news. And that's why I like to see the news from as many angles as I can with the help of today's sponsor, Ground News. And right now, they're offering LegalEagle viewers 40% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. You can scan the QR code or use the link in the description to get a discount for a limited time. Because Ground News gathers related articles from around the world and across the political spectrum, so you can see the bias and compare coverage. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. I also love their blind spot feature, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. Like the story that just broke of Pam Bondi announcing 68 arrests on Saturday night alone, along with identifying 135 undocumented immigrants that the DOJ believes to be gang members or violent criminals, though that seems incredibly suspicious. And about 75% of the coverage of the story came from the right, with 25% coming from the center, and as of this recording, there's no coverage from the left. And that's why Ground News is my favorite way to get the news. And as a legal eaglet, you can save 40% off the Ground News Vantage subscription by scanning the code that's on screen or clicking on the link down below. This subscription gives you unlimited access to every feature, including the Bias Insight tool and the Blind Spot feed. And by subscribing, you'll support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent and balanced. So click on the link below or scan the code today, or I'll see you in court. And Judge Reyes clearly indicated that she believed that the Trump administration had exceeded its authority under the Home Rule Act. She told plaintiffs' counsel that, quote, I agree with you that they're not allowed to take over the police force. And she quipped the defense counsel, quote, if I gave him truth serum, he'd probably agree. And she told the Justice Department that she would block Bondi's August 14th order unless the government removed the provisions appointing Cole as emergency police commissioner and giving him authority over the department. And Judge Reyes stated that in future hearings, she'd be particularly interested in exploring the party's factual arguments about the district's crime statistics, since these are being used by the administration to justify its incursion. Then Judge Reyes twisted some arms, urging the parties to come to some kind of compromise that would at least stand for the weekend until she could adjudicate the facts. She gave the parties an hour to draft up some terms, and the Trump administration backed down a little bit. Bondi issued an updated order which removed the provision appointing Cole to be emergency police commissioner and softened several of the other provisions. Instead of suspending or rescinding various district policies, Bondi directed the mayor to provide law enforcement services related to immigration enforcement, data sharing, and homeless camps. So, victory? Maybe? Kind of? But in the meantime, National Guard and various federal law enforcement agencies are still hanging around the district looking for immigrants to harass. And they finally found some hardened criminals. Because this is the dumbest timeline, here's a headline from an actual press release published by the United States Department of Justice. Former DOJ employee who hurled a hoagie at a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol officer charged with assault. Yes, this press release stems from an incident on August 10th that occurred at one of DC's most popular drinking and carousing locations, the U Street corridor. Now, if you've ever lived in DC, at some point in your life, you've had a few too many drinks at a U Street bar and done something that you regret. For Sean Charles Dunn, unfortunately, that involved a Subway sandwich, a CBP officer, a felony charge, and a ridiculously over-the-top arrest. Because at 11 p.m. on the night of August 10th, Sean Dunn, clad in a pink preppy shirt and khaki shorts, worthy of a 1980s frat party, spotted a group of CBP officers patrolling the streets of DC. He shouted at them, then hurled a Subway sandwich, hitting one of the agents in his well-armored chest. Dunn then fled on foot, was pursued by officers, and captured. A bystander captured this incident with a phone camera, so you can see all of the gory, violent details yourself. But as always, the Trump administration took the high road, so they issued a reasonably worded, restrained statement about Dunn's arrest. I'm just kidding. Instead, Pam Bondi proclaimed, quote, "This is an example of the deep state we have been up against for several months as we work to refocus DOJ. You will not work in this administration while disrespecting our government and law enforcement." And not to be outdone, and I can't believe I'm saying this, DC U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro chimed in stating, quote, "He thought he was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony, assault on the police officer. So there, stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else." And Kash Patel, I can't believe I'm saying this, the current FBI director, included Subway sandwich assault on his list of arrest accomplishments for that night. And this is the Trump administration, so instead of allowing Mr. Dunn to turn himself in, as his attorney claims he was trying to do, the Department of Justice sent a cadre of 20 assault rifle-equipped federal agents to bang on his apartment door at 11 p.m. And then the White House proudly posted this insane video montage on Twitter.
Coming down!
Oh, I'm sorry. I think they got the music wrong. I think the music they intended to use was this.
Subway, eat fresh.
So as you can see, the White House scrambled Meal Team 6, part of the Gravy SEALs, under the command of Colonel Sanders, with the help of the Special Flavors Unit, to invade the rich West End neighborhood of DC. This was all part of Desert Storm, and the arrest was coordinated by MacOps Command. He was charged with 1 count of assault with a deli weapon. Yes, this is your tax dollars at work. And so for the crime of throwing a sandwich at a well-armed, body-armored Customs and Border Protection officer, Dunn has been charged with 1 felony count of assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers and employees of the United States. The government's complaint specifies that Dunn is being charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 111, which prohibits forcibly assaulting, resisting, imposing, impeding, intimidating, or interfering with certain law enforcement agents, including CBP officers, while they're engaged in the performance of their official duties. Now, simple assault under the statute carries a maximum penalty of 1 year imprisonment, and a higher level of assault carries up to 8 years. And that typically includes some kind of physical contact, which, yeah, I guess throwing a hoagie at a CBP officer is probably going to qualify. That being said, it's difficult to imagine that a DC jury would send Dunn to jail for throwing a Subway sandwich, but Bondi and Pirro definitely seem committed to prosecuting him. And they definitely need a win because another one of their recent high-profile cases has fizzled. You might have heard about Sidney Laurie Reed, who's another DC resident that the DOJ tried to make an example of. And according to DOJ's proud press release, Reed tried to impede the transfer of an alleged gang member to ICE custody. Reed was taking video of several ICE officials, and after she started yelling at them, they pushed her up against a wall. When the officers tried to control her, her flailing arm movements made contact with an FBI agent. Though there was no injury shown on the video, the DOJ charged her with assaulting a federal officer under the same section, 18 U.S.C. 111. But what wasn't previously known was that federal prosecutors twice tried to convince a grand jury to charge Reed, and twice the grand jury came back with a no bill, meaning that they would not indict her. This is particularly notable because grand juries only require a showing of probable cause, which is a much lower standard than beyond the reasonable doubt standard needed to actually convict someone in a criminal case. Still, a DOJ attorney was forced to admit that it couldn't meet that low threshold last week. No worries though, they'll get another try with Sean Dunn. He's currently being released on his own recognizance awaiting trial. At the time of this video, he'd been charged by information which doesn't require approval by a grand jury.
Remember, grand juries nearly always indict. When they start saying no, it's a red flag that something is seriously off.
And the no bill in the Reed case is remarkable because it's said to be so easy for prosecutors to get a grand jury to indict someone that they'll indict a ham sandwich. But the question is, will they indict a Subway sandwich?
So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. We're going to use it as a very positive example.
But if you are indicted with a sandwich-related crime, you're going to want a good lawyer. Luckily, I know a guy. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get hundreds of comments and emails from viewers who are dealing with legal problems. And they'd ask, can you help me find a lawyer? Or how do I know if this attorney is any good? And there's a massive gap in our justice system. It's that people don't know how to find the right lawyer for their specific situation. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, and they end up doing nothing or hiring the first attorney who calls them back. And that really bothered me. So I started to wonder, what if there was a different way? What if we could build a law firm that actually lived up to the values that I talk about on this channel? Transparency, accessibility, and putting clients first instead of chasing billable hours. A firm where you don't need to pay anything up front and your lawyers only get paid if you do to maximize your opportunity for justice. So a few years ago, I decided to fix that problem. I decided to start my own personal injury law firm. And honestly, it wasn't an easy choice. But I realized I was in this unique position. I had this platform, this community, and the experience. Not to get rich, trust me, there are easier ways to make money than starting a law practice. But we did it because access to justice shouldn't be a luxury. Because finding the right legal representation shouldn't feel like playing Russian roulette with your future. And when you work with my firm, you're not just getting a lawyer. You're getting a team that understands that behind every case is a real person with real stakes. If we can't represent you or you're in a state where we don't practice, we'll take the time to try to match you with an attorney in my personal network of lawyers. A national network of some of the best lawyers in the country who actually specialize in what you're going through, located right where you are, not just whoever happens to be available. So if you're dealing with a personal injury, a car crash, a data breach, sexual harassment, a social security or workers' comp issue, give us a call at the number on screen or click on the link below. Now, I can't represent everyone that watches this channel. I wish I could, but what I can do is make sure that when you need legal help, you have somewhere to turn to that you can trust. So whether it's me handling your case or the incredible attorneys we partnered with, you'll get the same principles of honesty and education that we bring to every video. And if you're dealing with a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, check out the link in the description. Let's have a conversation about how we can help you find not just a lawyer, but the right lawyer for your situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, making sure that when life gets complicated, you don't have to face it alone. Which is why when you need a lawyer, you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team.